Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. No one but the people who lived through it can know what it was like to be a prisoner in a Nazi concentration camp. We can only guess how people got through each day and how they stayed sane in the midst of terrible things. Viktor Frankl, who was a prisoner in a Nazi camp and lived to tell about it, helps us understand how hard it was for people to live there. These events also gave Frankl proof for his psychological theory, logotherapy, which says that we need to find our own personal meaning of life in order to thrive and, in the worst cases, survive. You'll learn how to find meaning in your life, why people lost hope in concentration camps, and how some people can find humor even in the worst situations. Today, everyone knows at least a little bit about the terrible, cruel things that were done in the Nazi concentration camps in Germany and Eastern Europe. In the same way, the people who were hurt by the Nazis during the Holocaust knew at least a little bit about what would happen to them. Because of this, you might think that the first thing people felt when they went into the camps was fear. Reactions, on the other hand, happened in 3 different stages. The first phase started when people got to the camp, or even as they were being taken there. The prisoners were so shocked by what was going on that they tried desperately to convince themselves that everything would be okay. Most prisoners had heard terrible stories about what happened in the camps, but when they were sent there, they told themselves that things would be different for them. When people got off the train at the Auschwitz death camp, for example, they were sent to the left or right, one group to do hard work and the other to be killed right away. No one knew what these groups meant, though. Due to the shock of getting to the camp, the prisoners fell for the delusion of reprieve and thought that standing in line would somehow save them from certain death. During this first phase, the prisoners who hadn't yet gotten used to the terrible things going on in the camp were very scared by everything that was happening. When they first got there, new prisoners couldn't handle seeing other prisoners get punished in the harshest ways for the smallest offenses. When they saw how bad things were, they quickly lost hope and began to see death as a way out. Most of them thought about killing themselves, maybe by grabbing the electric fence around the camp. After being shocked at first, prisoners soon got used to the horror and death that was all around them, which made them feel nothing. Instead, everything they thought and felt was about staying alive. Instead of thinking about feelings like love or desire, for example, prisoners mostly talked and even dreamed about food or other essential, life-sustaining pleasures that we usually take for granted but that were severely limited in the camps. In the first phase, prisoners tried to hide from the horror. In the second phase, their dull emotions acted as a shield, giving them the strength to deal with the daily cruelty of the camps and take any chance to improve their chances of survival. For example, when typhus broke out in one of the camps and killed several people, the prisoners in the second phase no longer felt disgust or pity when they looked at the bodies. Instead, they saw it as a chance to take any food, shoes, or other clothes that the dead prisoners still had. There was no way they could get out of the camp except to be killed by the guards, so the prisoners couldn't see that life still had any point. Most of the time, we live for the future. We make big plans and look forward to seeing how our lives turn out. But the prisoners in the camps had a very different view. For them, there was nothing to look forward to. No one knew when, or if, their prison sentence would end, so they didn't even have a future. Most people in prison thought that their lives were over. They just existed in the camp. They stopped living because they had nothing to work toward. Those prisoners who were lucky enough to make it out of the concentration camps had to deal with a new set of problems when they were freed. Most people had been in the camps for so long that it was hard for them to live a normal life. The prisoners couldn't understand what it meant to be free right away. Since they were used to feeling nothing, they couldn't change their minds right away. At first, prisoners couldn't feel any happiness or pleasure. They had dreamed of freedom so many times that when it finally came, it didn't seem real. After being set free, many prisoners felt that it was their turn to hurt other people because they had been hurt so badly by their captors. After being treated so badly, it made sense to them to try to get some kind of payback, like getting back at the guards in the camps. Also, prisoners who were set free didn't always get the warm welcome they thought they would when they got back home. Unfortunately, when many prisoners got home, their families were dead and their towns were in ruins. But they were not just sad because they had lost family and friends. They wanted someone to feel sorry for them and understand their pain. Too often, though, the people they talked to after they got out, who had never been in a concentration camp, would just shrug and say that they had been through similar things, like rationing and bombing. Even though it wasn't easy for the freed prisoners to get back to normal, most of them were able to enjoy their lives again and be happy that they'd lived through the Holocaust. So far, we've seen how hard it was for the prisoners to live in the camp. But how did they keep their minds from going crazy and live through the horrors? In the end, everything came down to where they put their attention. Some people could escape the fear and cruelty of their surroundings by thinking about their loved ones and remembering the past. In fact, people who could find at least a little bit of happiness in their memories often did better than others. In the harsh reality of the camps, where they were forced to work hard in the cold with little more than rags on their backs, they had no relief. Love, on the other hand, could make them happy. Even if it was just in their minds, the camp guards couldn't stop them from having a nice chat with their loved ones. Even the most ordinary things, like turning on the lights in their own bedrooms back home, could help them feel better. Some of the prisoners were able to feel better by spending time in nature or laughing. Even if it was only for a moment, a beautiful sunset or a cute bird could give the prisoners a little bit of happiness. During their half-hour lunch break, prisoners got together in small groups and tried to forget about their real lives by singing or doing other small performances. There were even a few times when prisoners were able to laugh. This humor often involved thinking about the future, after they got out of camp, and making jokes about how the things they did every day in camp might affect things in the future. For example, while sitting at the family dinner table, they might forget where they were and ask for soup from the bottom of the bowl, where the few nutritious peas would be found in the camp cook pots. We all take it for granted that we have the freedom to choose, whether it's our clothes, our lunch, or the charities we give to. Of course, nothing could be taken for granted in the camps. The ability to decide for oneself took on a completely new meaning. Most decisions were a matter of life or death, and many prisoners were afraid to make them. Sometimes, for example, prisoners were ordered to go to another camp. However, the prisoners were kept in the dark about the true destination and the meaning of the transfer. The guards sometimes referred to these as rest camps, but no one could be certain that they weren't being led to the gas chambers. So, once prisoners realized that they would be sent elsewhere, some would become desperate to change that decision. This was sometimes possible if they worked harder for their captors, for example, by volunteering for extra shifts. Yet there was also the possibility that their new camp would actually bring them relief. There was simply no way for them to know what decision would be best, and thus many prisoners decided that they should not intervene in their fate. There were other prisoners, however, who were determined to maintain even the tiniest freedoms, and therefore grabbed any opportunity to make decisions. Despite their miserable conditions, these prisoners tried, as far as was possible, to live in accordance with their own values. Their spiritual life, for example, was something that couldn't be taken away from them. Although they might have to abandon their rituals, they could still decide to live up to high moral standards. For instance, some prisoners would give bread to those who were in greater need, even though they were hungry too. The author witnessed many terrible scenes in the camps. During that time, he realized again and again that people need meaning in their lives in order to have something to look forward to. Indeed, the prisoners who could maintain this meaning were stronger and more resilient than those who had lost it. This observation helped confirm many ideas from his own theory of psychotherapy, logotherapy, which posits that our search for meaning is the greatest motivation in our lives. There is plenty of research that supports this idea. For example, in a study from Johns Hopkins University, students were asked what they considered to be central in their lives. The vast majority, 78%, reported that finding a purpose and meaning in life was most important to them. When we're unable to find meaning in our lives, we're left with what is referred to as an existential vacuum. People who are unable to live according to their values, or feel like their lives have no meaning, will find a kind of emptiness inside themselves. You don't have to undergo serious trauma to experience the existential vacuum. Just take the widespread Sunday neurosis, for example, which occurs when people start to relax after a structured week of hard work, only to realize that their lives are totally devoid of substance. Logotherapy aims to help people find meaning, and thus prevent the negative consequences that could result from a persisting existential vacuum. Knowing how important it is to find a purpose in life, we're left asking ourselves how we go about finding our own. Indeed, many people believe that, in order to make the right choices in life, they must first discover their life's purpose. Logotherapy, however, suggests that the opposite is true. It's how we act, and it's the responsibility we feel toward our choices that determines our meaning. For example, the prisoners in the concentration camps who were able to maintain a purpose in life did so based on the choices that they made. The decision to look for beauty in nature or help others in greater need gave them a purpose, a realization that they were not beaten and could keep going. One consequence of this is that our meanings don't have to be the same. In fact, everyone has his own meaning of life. If you ask a chess grandmaster the best move, she'll tell you that there is no best move in general. There is, however, a best move depending on the varying situations during the game. The same applies to life's meaning. There is no general meaning of life, and life's meaning depends on each individual's unique set of circumstances and decisions. Logotherapy aims to help people understand the possibility that their lives can have meaning and that everybody has to figure out his life's purpose according to his own decisions. The meaning of life has no restrictions. For example, you might discover that your new job at a recycling startup offers you personal meaning, for example, feeling like you're part of a positive contribution to the world, or it could go beyond the personal, and involve society and social conscience, for example, seeing the improvement in other people's lives. Although the ultimate goal of logotherapy is to help patients find the meaning of life, that isn't its sole application. Logotherapy has also developed a number of techniques that are helpful for people who've developed mental disorders, for example, after experiencing an existential vacuum. Logotherapy is able to accomplish this by focusing on the internal rather than external factors that affect patients. In normal psychotherapy, the patient is analyzed and his neurotic fears explained by his environment and other external events and circumstances. In contrast, logotherapy assumes that people are able to make decisions and define their life's purpose independently of their environment. This basic understanding is necessary to help people realize that they are actually in control of their fears and anxieties in order to achieve long-term results. But how? Logotherapy makes use of this strange phenomenon. When we fear something will happen, it often does, yet when we try and force something to happen, it never happens. Imagine you have a nervous friend who is deathly afraid of blushing in front of other people. Since he's always thinking about it, he immediately starts blushing whenever he's in a crowd. In this situation, logotherapy uses something called paradoxical intention, in which the patient is asked to do exactly the thing that she is afraid of. Your nervous friend, for example, could start trying to blush as much as possible whenever he is around other people. Soon he'll notice that when he tries to force it, nothing happens, and he'll thus lose his fear of blushing. Our success, and sometimes our very survival, is dependent upon our ability to find our life's meaning. This doesn't have to be something grand or existential, your own personal meaning depending on your immediate circumstances will do just fine. Thanks for watching.